Arthur Geese, your gun and your badge now on my desk. I'm tired of it.
That's the sound of the police, Griffin.
Whoop whoop. That is the sound of the police. This is Battlefield Hardline. This is a video I cut together of some multiplayer and a little bit of the single player, which earlier today, or possibly yesterday, depending on when we can get this video up, I posted 40 minutes of the single player campaign. First entire chapter and everything that's available on the EA Access trial build of Battlefield Hardline, which if you have EA Access, you can go grab right now and play for 10 hours before the game launches next Tuesday.
Which explains why the single-player part is only a trial right now, since you could probably finish it in that much time.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, most of this video, though, is the multiplayer, because, Arthur, you've had much more of an opportunity to check this out. Now, the multiplayer that you get in EA Access is basically, like, the whole thing, right? It's the whole kit and caboodle.
I mean, not basically, it is. It is, like, the complete multiplayer element of the game for 10 hours.
And I guess just, like, as long as we're doing a preface for this video, I am fucking terrible at Battlefield. And just by virtue of the fact that, like, of all of the multiplayer shooters, I have spent, like, the least amount of time with it. This is pretty fun, though. This guy got to the extraction point with the heist bag and got blown up by a trip mine.
Yeah.
So this is heist mode. It's one of the new modes in Hardline in which the thief team tries to get these bags and get them to an extraction point while the cop team tries to stop them. This is actually you playing.
And this is me owning fools.
Yeah, you can tell because you're actually, like, killing people.
And here's a new thing in Battlefield, which is that if you get a melee thing from behind on somebody as a cop, you actually arrest them. Like, you put them down on the ground and arrest them. And I think you actually get intel on where other people in the area are when that happens.
Yeah, I think on both teams you can interrogate. Yeah, that is kind of a neat mechanic, and it's kind of a crossover of some of the single-player stuff. We'll talk more about that later, but in the single-player, like, there's a much larger emphasis on non-lethal takedowns and actually arresting people instead of just shooting them in the face a bunch of times. And it's cool to see some of that stuff come across in the multiplayer. I mean, you get a lot of the conquest stuff, like the Battlefield trademark TM shit. But I don't know, I actually kind of enjoy some of these modes. This is probably the mode that I proved the most adept at. It's just a hostage mode where kind of the same concept as the heist except in reverse. The criminals have hostages they're trying to keep the cops from rescuing. And there's only one life. You only get one life. So things like the revive special tool are, like, super helpful. You have to be really careful with your blood in this one.
This is I mean, a lot of this stuff in this game sort of borrows from Counter-Strike ideas of the multiplayer shooter, and in the what they called at the event I went to earlier this week, the sort of esports modes, like the single life spawn.
Yeah. I mean, those are becoming so, like, such a constant throughout all shooters. There's some levolution, a little bit of levolution happening there. God, I'm glad that term has just stuck around in the collective consciousness of the video game playing America.
Of Battlefield, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that at its heart, like, Hardline has some very, like, predictable stuff. Like, it is a Battlefield game, and then it feels like the least sort of inventive as far as mechanics and technology of any Battlefield game in a really long time.
Sure, but I would argue that the modes are a little bit, like, that is where the inventiveness comes in, like in the heist mode, or my personal favorite, Hotwire, which we'll get to here in a little bit. I feel like that I mean, there are a ton of modes to play, and each one is fairly distinct. Like, I didn't even have time to put all of them in this video. That is how many there are. And there are some neat things, like, I don't know, I really like the zipline tool. I've yet to find a practical application for it that doesn't just get me killed. But yeah, there's a zipline you can find that you can use across the level fairly quickly. So yeah, some of that stuff feels pretty cool, but you're right, it definitely still feels like basically all the other Battlefield games. But I mean, I'm not sure I was expecting it to be completely reinvented. You know?
I think what I mean by that more specifically is that, like, every numbered quote Battlefield over the last sort of 6 years has added something pretty significant to the game. Like, Bad Company 2 was where destruction really took a sort of big place in Battlefield, and Battlefield 3 is where the maps got big again, and Battlefield 4 tried to sort of mix the destruction and map size of the two games prior to it, whereas this is very much like the differences in this are sort of tonal and subject matter oriented, and I think that leads to some interesting experiments like the sort of zipline stuff and like the different modes, but as far as a mechanical experience, it's much less different than previous Battlefield games have been.
This is sweet though. Imagine though if there was like an enemy that I just like dropped on and killed, but I didn't because there wasn't anybody there and I didn't do anything.
No, but you got across the map a lot faster. Walking is a very slow way to get around a large map in Battlefield.
Especially in Hotwire, which is this mode. So Hotwire is great. It is, imagine sort of Conquest, but if the capture points were vehicles, and the way that you actually captured them was getting into them, and then driving them at a certain speed.
It's Conquest meets Speed.
It's Conquest meets Speed, and it's rad. Like, it is the mode that I've played the most. I'm still not great at it, but, like, I don't know. I still love... I don't love the huge maps of Battlefield. I think that might be, like, one of the main reasons why I've never really gotten into it. It's just because, like, I have a hard time grokking what to do with all that space. And I typically just run for a minute and a half and get shot with sniper fire. But, like, this stuff is rad. Like, I was trying to chase down that helicopter on my motorcycle and, like, trying to take pot shots at the pilot of it as I, like, switch between seats on my motorcycle and, like, doing jumps off ramps and shit. Like, that is still my favorite thing about Battlefield, and it's, like, what you get for the trade-off of, you know, these big maps. And I think Hotwire does a really good job of that. I really like popping out the windows of cars and sitting on the windows to mow shit down. That's pretty sweet. And then just, like, keeping your car alive while you go fast enough and not run into anything is just... I don't know. I just think it's a super, super good idea. Now, I have run into some vehicular mine situations.
Yeah, the booby traps.
Those are, I would say, far more present, far more common in Hotwire, and it is always a bummer when it happens. But there's also the fact that, like, music pops on basically every time you hop in a car, and it's usually, like, badass car chase music. So... yeah, I don't know. I think of all, like, the new ideas that Battlefield Hardline introduces, I feel like Hotwire is, like, where all of those things come together best. For me, I think Heist is probably, like, going to be the trademark mode, but this does it for me, but that might just be because I'm terrible at shooting stuff.
Yeah, I think that Hotwire in particular is sort of an ingenuity that a lot of the rest of the game doesn't necessarily show.
Yeah.
But my...
bus ramp... that was dope.
Sweet jumps. I think one of my concerns about the game is that in Battlefield games, typically the player population orients around specific things.
Yeah, which is Conquest almost always, right? Like,
right, because Conquest is what, like, defines Battlefield.
Right.
And Hotwire maybe will gain an audience because it is Conquest with, like, vehicle capture points.
Yeah.
But there are so many modes in Battlefield Hardline to the point where I honestly think it might be kind of a liability that there's so many different things to split a player base in a game series that has typically struggled a little bit with its server sort of set up to have
a little
active
bit
populations everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that it'll settle down and there will be, you know, 2 or 3 modes that people actually play. This is a bit of the customization stuff. There's I didn't go too heavy on it. You got your battle packs and, you know, I feel like this hasn't changed a whole lot since.
And now you earn in-game currency to unlock weapons, which feels sort of Black Ops 2-ish to me.
Which I'm into. It's just like I'm having a problem with it, and it's the problem that I've had with well, to be fair, like almost every multiplayer focused shooter, which is like I feel like you start out with almost nothing. Like the options you have starting out puts you way, way, way behind the curve of another player that is, you know, 10 or so ranks above you, which you will end up in matches with, and I don't know. It just makes it kind of a bummer, but I'm just now, after a few hours of playing, like starting to get to a point where I feel like my equipment can actually make me competitive. So this is the single player stuff.
Yep, you're arresting dudes.
I'm arresting dudes. It's an interesting thing. You can freeze up to 3 enemies at a time using your badge, which will make them stand in place, and then you have to keep moving your gun around them or else they'll get freaked out and shoot you, and then you can one by one arrest them. Here I'm doing a little bit of detective work by bringing out my detective camera, which vibrates.
Unlocked, Griffin.
Yeah, I did it. Your detective camera, which vibrates when evidence is near, which seems like kind of a cop-out, no pun intended. Oh, and then there's also this great system where you can throw bullet casings to distract enemies, kind of a Far Cry thing. Did you check out that sweet bullet casing shot? I got it right in that desk drawer. That was totally sick.
If you can find a cup in this game to try to throw bullet casings,
dude, that's
into
gonna be
with your
all I
friends.
do when this thing comes out, is try and pull off sweet bullet casing beer pong shots.
This is a taser. I
Taser,
assume?
yep. Got that as one of my utilities. Kind of OP, if you ask me. I think we might need to nerf the taser because it makes short work out of this stuff. Yeah, so like of all this single player stuff, there's like I haven't like killed anybody yet. And there are definitely times where you are going to be straight up murdering people. Like the game starts out with a shootout. So it's not like you can go through the game like trying to be a non-violent police officer, or rather a non-fatal police officer. Like there are times where you're gonna have to kill people, but like I don't know, I think it's interesting this idea of non-fatal takedowns being like a really big part of the game. Like you can make it through a lot of most levels, or just the levels that are available in this demo is all I can speak to, but being able to like go through almost all those levels without killing anybody is kind of a refreshing change of pace for the Battlefield series. And then of course this is a cinematic cutscene where one of your squad mates gets injured and you have to keep them alive while shooting other things, which I feel like is in every Battlefield game, if not every AAA shooter.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't... I'm interested to see what the campaign does, arguably more than multiplayer, because that seems like the focus of this game, more than the multiplayer, honestly. Like, I think that this is them trying to get a campaign right in a Battlefield game, which is something that the series has never done.
And I haven't played enough. I don't think anybody's played enough to speak to how successfully they pull that off. But like they do some interesting stuff in this first chapter. Not all of it works. It still feels. I mean, I still have the same issues that I've had with most shooter campaigns and being kind of mindless shoot fest, but then there are some like genuinely interesting things with how they handle like the procedural cop stuff. So we'll see how successfully they can do the rest of that when the game launches next Tuesday.